She came from a small town where most people didn't have much. Her family lived in a tiny, broken house with a tin roof that leaked when it rained. Life was always hard. She had grown up with 3 younger siblings, and after her parents passed away in a road accident, she had to take care of them on her own. She was just 16 when her world changed. With no money, no one to help, and 3 hungry mouths to feed. She did the only thing she could. She left her home and went to the city to look for work. After days of searching, she finally found a job as a maid in a very rich man's mansion. It wasn't easy. She had to clean huge rooms, Polish furniture that looked more expensive than her whole village, and work from sunrise to sunset. But she never complained. Every month, she sent most of her salary back home so her siblings could go to school and have food on the table. The mansion was like a palace. Its marble floors, golden decorations, and a giant piano in the center of the music room. Who owned it all was known for being proud, cold, and distant. He barely even looked at her. To him, she was just another servant. He didn't know her story, didn't care where she came from or how hard she had worked to get there. He just wanted his house to be clean and his meals to be hot. But the maid had a secret she kept buried deep inside her heart. When she was a little girl, her father had taught her how to play the piano. He wasn't rich, but he had found an old broken piano someone was throwing away and fixed it piece by piece with his hands. Every evening after work, he would sit with her and teach her how to play. Music became her happy place, a world where everything felt okay, even when they had no money. Her fingers remembered every note, every key. Even though she hadn't touched a piano in years, she never told anyone in the mansion that she knew how to play. The other workers might laugh. The rich man wouldn't care. But at night, when the house was quiet and dark, she would sometimes sneak into the music room. She didn't dare to turn on the lights. She just sat on the bench, placed her fingers on the keys, and played soft, silent tunes. The sound was faint, almost like a whisper, but it was enough. For a few minutes, she wasn't a maid. She was just a girl lost in her music. One night, she played a melody her father had taught her. It was sad and beautiful. She didn't notice that someone was watching from the shadows. The rich man had come home early from a meeting and had paused by the hallway, surprised by the sound coming from the music room. He stood quietly, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he turned and walked away without saying a word. Never knew he had seen her. The next day, things went back to normal. She mopped the floors, cleaned the windows, and washed the dishes. But something had changed. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she had touched that piano, her life had started moving in a direction she never expected. A simple act, a quiet moment, would soon pull her into a situation that would test her strength and reveal a gift she had almost forgotten, and it all began with a girl, a piano, in a heart full of memories she could no longer hide. Every night, after a long and tiring day of cleaning and working in the mansion, she would quietly walk to the music room. She always made sure no one was around. The house would be dark, quiet, and still. All the other workers would be asleep. She would gently open the door, step inside, and sit on the piano bench. It was the only place where she felt peace. Piano was large and shiny, nothing like the broken one her father had brought home when she was a child. But when she placed her fingers on the keys, the feeling was the same. The music made her heart feel warm again. It was the only thing that reminded her of who she used to be before life became so hard. She didn't play loudly. She was always afraid someone might hear, so she played softly, just enough to feel the keys respond under her touch. She played the same melodies her father had taught her, slow, deep songs that carried the feelings of love, sadness, and hope. Her fingers moved naturally. It was like the music lived inside her, waiting to come out again. She missed her father every time she played. He used to smile so proudly when she played well. He would clap his hands and laugh, saying, "One day people will listen to you play. They will cry because your music will touch their hearts." But that day never came. Life had different plans. After he died, everything changed. It was no more time for music. It's only survival now. Years later, in a mansion where no one knew her past, she played alone for herself and for the memory of the father who once believed in her. She didn't know that someone had heard her. The rich man who owned the house had started to notice that his music room door was sometimes unlocked. At first he thought it was just the cleaners forgetting to lock up. But one evening, as he walked past the room late at night, he heard something unexpected: soft music, flowing like water in the air. He stopped, confused. Who was playing the piano? He peeked through the open door and saw her as maid sitting at the grand piano, playing with closed eyes and steady hands. Her face looked calm, but there was a quiet pain behind it, like she was remembering something far away. He didn't say anything, just stood there in the shadows, watching and listening. The music was beautiful. It didn't seem possible that a simple maid could play like that. The next day, he said nothing, and we watched her from a distance as she worked. She was the same quiet girl, washing floors, wiping tables, keeping her head down. He didn't speak to her, but a strange idea had started to form in his mind, one that he thought might be entertaining for himself. She had no idea. Her private world had been seen. She had no idea that her secret was no longer a secret. Back in the servant quarters, the other workers sometimes laughed about how she never talked much. They didn't know she had a gift. She never told anyone. She thought no one would understand. Who would believe a maid could play like a professional? It was better to stay quiet and keep that piece of herself hidden. But deep down, she wished she could share her music again. It's not to show off, but to feel that connection again, the way she used to feel when her father listened to her. That silent wish lived inside her heart. Even if she never spoke it aloud, she didn't know it yet, but her wish was about to be tested. The rich man had made a plan, and it would either break her or bring her gift out into the light where the whole world could see. The rich man liked being the center of attention. Every few weeks, he threw big parties at his mansion. Fancy cars would line the driveway. Important guests in expensive clothes would fill the hallways. Waiters served drinks on silver trays and soft music played in the background. Everything was about showing off his wealth, his power, his success. One morning, he walked into the kitchen with a strange smile on his face. He looked at the maid as she was quietly washing the dishes. She kept her head down, as always. But this time he didn't ignore her. He asked her to come to the dining room after she finished. She was nervous. The rich man never spoke to her unless he was giving orders. She wiped her hands, fixed her scarf, and slowly walked to where he sat, sipping his morning coffee. He didn't look angry. In fact, he seemed pleased with himself. He leaned back in his chair and said, "There's a party this weekend. Some of my close friends will be here. They enjoy music." Then he looked straight at her and added, "You'll play the piano for them?" Her heart almost stopped. She stood frozen, not knowing how to answer. Did he really mean it? Or was he mocking her? She gently replied, "Sir, I'm just a maid." He smiled again, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Yes, that's what makes it interesting," he said. "My guests will find it amusing." She understood right away. He didn't believe in her talent. He just wanted to make her a joke. Poor girl playing in front of rich people. Expected her to fumble, to hit. Wrong notes to be laughed at. He wanted to embarrass her for his own fun. She wanted to say no. She wanted to run away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was her father's voice in her heart. Maybe it was the years she had hidden her music in the dark. Whatever it was, she nodded and said softly, "Yes, sir." Da-da-da. Days passed slowly. She still worked hard cleaning floors, cooking meals, but her mind kept going back to the piano. Night she practiced alone in the music room, just like before. But this time she played with a purpose. She knew the eyes of strangers would be on her soon. In the servant quarters, the other maids and cooks started whispering. Some of them laughed behind her back. "Why, she thinks she's a pianist now," and said, "She'll make a fool of herself." Another joked. She heard them, but she didn't let it break her. She stayed quiet. Every night her fingers danced over the keys, smoother and stronger than before. Her fear slowly turned into calm. The music was like a flame inside her, burning brighter with every practice. The rich man walked past the music room a few times that week, pretending not to care. But he listened from behind the walls. Even he couldn't deny that the music was good, very good, but his pride didn't let him admit it. He still believed that when the party came, her nerves would get the best of her. He thought she would fall apart in front of his guests. He had no idea what was really growing inside her. He didn't know that this moment, which he planned as a joke, was about to become something much more powerful. A quiet storm was building, one that would change everything. The night of the party was just a day away. Now the piano was polished. The living room was decorated with lights and flowers. But the real spotlight was going to be on a simple maid, and the music she carried in her soul. The night of the party finally arrived. The mansion was glowing with lights. Expensive cars parked outside one after another. The air smelled of rich perfumes and roasted meats. Laughter and chatter filled every corner of the house. Everything was loud, shiny, and full of pride. The maid stood in the hallway, quietly looking at the people walking around in silk dresses and black suits. She held her hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. Her heart beat fast in her chest. She was wearing a simple, clean dress that belonged to one of the other maids. It wasn't fancy, but it was the best she had. She had brushed her hair back neatly, and her shoes were old but polished. She didn't feel like she belonged here. She didn't come from money. She didn't have an expensive education or rich parents. She was just the maid. And now, she was expected to play the piano in front of all these people who didn't even know her name. From a distance, the rich man watched her with a smirk. He sipped his drink and whispered something to his guests. They laughed quietly, glancing toward her. To them, she was just part of the evening's entertainment, something to laugh at between their fancy meals and wine. The music room had been prepared for her performance. A small stage light was turned on above the piano. The guests slowly gathered around, curious to see what was about to happen. Some of them even whispered, "She's really going to play." Others chuckled, already expecting a disaster. The maid walked slowly into the room. Every step felt heavy. Her palms were sweaty. She kept walking until she reached the piano. She stood for a moment, looking at the keys. The room was filled with eyes. Some looked amused. Some looked bored. Some looked confused. No one looked kind. She sat down. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She closed her eyes. She remembered her father's voice. "Play with your heart, not your hands," he used to say. She took a deep breath. Her fingers touched the keys gently. Then she began to play. At first the room was still. Some people smirked, expecting the wrong note to come at any second. But it didn't. The notes were soft and smooth, like water flowing in a quiet stream. Her fingers moved with grace and control. She didn't look up. She just let the music speak. The sound filled the room like magic. Each note told a story of struggle, of lost dreams, of quiet strength. The people who had been laughing before now fell silent. The rich man's smile slowly disappeared. His eyes narrowed, confused and surprised, as the music continued. Something began to change in the room. People leaned forward in their chairs. Some looked at each other with wide eyes. Others stopped sipping their drinks. The room was quiet, now so quiet that the softest note could be heard clearly. She didn't rush. She didn't try to impress. She just played from her heart, remembering every lesson, every moment with her father. Every night she practiced in the dark when no one was watching. It all came together now in this one performance. When she reached the final note, the room was completely still. She lifted her hands from the piano and finally looked up. She expected laughter. She expected someone to clap slowly in a mocking way. But instead, there was silence. A heavy, respectful silence. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another, and another. Soon the whole room was filled with applause. It's real applause. Honest and loud. The maid sat there, shocked. She didn't expect this. She had never dreamed of this. And the rich man, he stood there, speechless. The girl he had planned to use as a joke had just stolen the night, not with words, not with clothes, but with a talent that no one could deny. The room was filled with loud clapping. Some guests stood from their chairs, still clapping. Few had tears in their eyes, and many looked shocked, amazed, and even a little ashamed. No one had expected this, not from a maid. The music she played had touched something deep in their hearts. It wasn't just a performance, it was real. It was full of feeling. The maid looked around, not knowing what to do. Her heart was still racing. Her hands were still warm from the piano keys. This was the first time she had played in front of strangers in so many years. She had prepared herself for insults, for laughter, for shame. But now, these same strangers were clapping for her like she was someone important. She slowly stood up from the piano bench. Her hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from disbelief. Her eyes searched the crowd and landed on the rich man who had forced her to play. He stood at the back, holding his glass, his face frozen. His usual confident smile was gone. His eyes were wide, and he said nothing. He wasn't clapping, just stared. For a few seconds, they looked at each other. She didn't smile, and she didn't bow. She simply looked at him, and in her eyes was something strong, something quiet but powerful. She had one, and they both knew it. Not in a proud or loud way, but in a way that couldn't be argued. Her music had done what money never could. One of the guests, an older man with silver hair, walked up to her as the clapping started to slow down. He looked at her kindly and said, "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." "Where did you learn to play like that?" His voice was calm and sincere. She looked down for a moment before answering softly, "My father taught me when I was a child." Another guest spoke, "Have you performed before?" "Ah, are you a student of music?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I used to play when I was younger, but after my parents passed, I had to stop." The room grew even quieter. The guests listened carefully, and many of them now looked at her not as a maid, but as a person with a story, a deep, real story that they could feel in every note she had played. The rich man walked forward slowly. He tried to act calm, but anyone could see the change in his face. The confidence had faded. He looked at her with a mix of shock and confusion. He cleared his throat. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone you could play like this?" She looked at him for a moment, then answered, "Because I wasn't here to be heard. I was here to work." Her words hit like a quiet wave in the room. No anger, no shouting, just truth. The guests now looked at the rich man, not with admiration, but with questions in their eyes. Did he know? Did he try to embarrass her? He opened his mouth to say something, but stopped. There was nothing he could say to make himself look better. The older guest stepped forward again and said, "You should not be cleaning floors. You should be performing. You have a gift that people need to hear." The maid felt something inside her shift. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her not with pity, not as a servant, but as an artist. And that small moment changed something in her heart. She nodded politely and thanked him, though she didn't know what would happen next. That night, after the party was over and the lights were turned off, she went back to the servant quarters. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child. Hope. The next morning, the mansion felt strangely quiet. The guests had left, the music had stopped, and the lights from the party had been taken down. The only sounds were the birds outside and the soft noise of maids cleaning up after the night's grand event. But something had changed. The maid walked slowly through the hallway, holding a bucket and a cloth. She had returned to her usual uniform, and everything felt normal again. Yet inside her, nothing felt the same. The servants looked at her differently now. Some were quiet around her. Few even came up and said softly, "You played beautifully." Others just nodded, unsure of how to act around her now. She wasn't just the maid anymore. Last night, they saw something they didn't expect. They saw her truth. She tried not to think too much about it. She didn't want to hope for anything big. She had learned long ago not to expect kindness from people like the man who owned the mansion. Still, the memory of the music, the clapping, the peaceful silence after her last note stayed with her. Later that day, the rich man called her to the study. She walked in slowly, unsure of what to expect. He sat behind his large wooden desk, looking serious, didn't smile. He tapped his fingers on the desk and looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I didn't know you could play like that," he said. She stood quietly. There was nothing to say. She had never hidden it on purpose. She just didn't think anyone would care. He cleared his throat and continued. "One of the guests who was here last night, he's a music professor. He teaches at a well-known music school in the city. He asked about you." Her eyes widened just a little, but she kept her voice calm. "What did he say?" "Said you have talent," the man replied. "He wants to meet you again. He thinks you should train properly. Thinks you could perform on real stages." She felt her breath catch for a moment. Her hands gripped the cloth she was holding. She had dreamed of something like this once, a long time ago, before life pulled her away from music, before her parents passed, before she had to grow up so fast. "I told him you'd think about it," the man added. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't used to feeling unsure around someone like her. "You don't have to go, of course, but it's your choice." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." There was a pause. Then, almost quietly, he said, "I'm sorry." She looked at him. "I only asked you to play because I thought it would be funny," he admitted. "I thought it would entertain the guests to see a maid try to play a grand piano. I didn't expect what happened." His words hung in the air. He didn't say more. And honestly, he didn't need to. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was more than she had ever expected from him. She left the room without anger. She wasn't thinking about revenge or pride. Her mind was somewhere else, on the piano, on the music, on the chance that was now opening in front of her. That night, she sat again at the piano. The house was quiet. No one was watching. No lights, no applause. Just her and the keys. She played softly, her fingers moving with ease. This time not because she had to hide, but because she finally believed in her gift again. She didn't know what her future would be, but something was waiting for her beyond the walls of this mansion, and for the first time in many years, she felt ready to chase it. A week later, the maid stood outside the music school in the city. It was nothing like the places she had known. The building was large and beautiful. Young students walked around with music sheets in their hands, instruments on their backs, and dreams in their eyes. She stood near the gate, holding her small bag tightly, unsure if she truly belonged here. The music professor who had seen her perform at the party had arranged for her to visit. He had said she didn't need to worry about anything, just come and play. But deep down, she still felt nervous. She had always been in kitchens and laundry rooms, not concert halls or practice studios. She slowly walked in, her eyes taking in everything. The halls were filled with the soft sounds of violins, pianos, and singing voices. She felt like she had stepped into a different world. A world she had once dreamed about as a little girl sitting beside her father on an old broken piano. The professor welcomed her warmly. He didn't treat her like a maid. He treated her like a musician. He led her into a quiet room with a piano and asked her to play. She sat down, took a deep breath, and let her fingers move over the keys. She played not to impress, but to feel. When she finished, the professor smiled. "You don't just play notes," he said. "You tell stories. That's what real musicians do." She looked at him, unsure what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. He told her that he wanted her to join the school. He said her talent was rare and real. He offered her a full scholarship, no money needed. All she had to do was work hard, and he would help guide her. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you," she said softly. She returned to the mansion that evening with a heart full of mixed feelings. It's a place that had once felt like a cage, now felt like a memory she was ready to leave behind. She packed her small bag, said goodbye to the other maids, and walked out of the big house one last time. The rich man didn't stop her. He watched her leave from the window. For once he had nothing to say. He just stood silently, knowing that the girl he had once tried to embarrass had turned out to be far greater than he ever expected. The city was not easy. Music school was full of challenges. But she worked hard every day. She studied, practiced, and learned from other students and teachers. Some days were tough. Some nights she cried in her small room. But she never gave up. Months passed, and years. One evening, her name appeared on the flyer for a music concert at a famous hall. She was going to perform in front of hundreds of people, not as a maid, not as someone hidden in the background, but as a true pianist. She walked onto the stage in a simple but elegant dress. The lights shone down on her. The audience clapped as she sat at the piano. She looked out and saw her siblings sitting in the front row, now grown and proud. She smiled, closed her eyes, and began to play. The notes floated through the air like stories told without words. Hands moved with grace and power. The audience listened in complete silence, just like that night at the mansion. And when she finished, they rose to their feet in applause. Her journey had not been easy. She had been ignored, judged, and used. But she had turned pain into music, and silence into strength. She didn't become great because someone gave her a chance. She became great because she never gave up.